2.
Hey, Linz, what are you listening to?
Brian, you share yours and I'll share mine.
With millions of podcasts, how do you choose?
We are here to help you find that next bingeable podcast.
Or that piece of content you'll follow regularly.
You're listening to Feed Drops. Welcome, everybody, to this next episode of Feed Drops. We're really happy to be here. My name is Linz, and I am the GM and executive producer for Growth Network Podcasts. And with me, as always, is Brian.
And my name is Brian, Sitch Radio in Irvine, California. Linz is just up the 5 freeway a little bit in LA.
Absolutely. It's nice to get out of our respective zones a little bit and get to work together on Feed Drops together.
And you know what's crazy about doing a live show?
What's crazy?
I look over to my right to grab my notes, and now I get to say, Linz, carry the show for a second.
Absolutely. Well, one of the great things about working with another producer is that we know we can trust each other to step in and fill some time or step in and cover some piece of the production if we know we have to take a call or some other, if our notes, for example, are in the other room. And I think I've done that sufficiently so that Brian is back in place and we can roll forward talking about our 2 episodes for this week.
You know, you did that wonderfully. I couldn't hear a thing you said.
Lovely. It was really, really, really good.
Riveting experience, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
You know, I guess I'll start. Today, I'm bringing you a show entitled The Field Op. This is hosted by a young man that goes by the name of Pacho. He is a retired Marine Chief Warrant Officer 3. And for those of you who are following along that are familiar with Chief Warrant Officers, you might ask, where did I find this unicorn? Because Chief Warrant Officers are far and few in between. He actually found me through a mutual organization that we're working in, but he is a combat vet, and I love working with vets and combat vets, and we do 2 shows with combat vets here. However, we're going to bring you little snippets of his show where he was actually interviewing another Marine combat veteran as well, who's taken up a totally different career path. So that's what I've got today. Linz, what are you bringing us?
I am bringing from a very different perspective, but also having some similar themes. It's an interview from a show that my company produces called Voices Behind the Music. And it's a show we make for Feed Media Group. They are a music licensing company, and they work on music curation and everything. And so they're having conversations with people who are the voices behind the music you may like or enjoy. And so the guest for this episode is a percussionist who has likely played drums and percussion with artists that everyone has heard of. And you may get to hear about some bands or artists that you really like.
Now, Linz, I really enjoyed this episode that you brought to the table. And I, once upon a time, used to play music. I was actually the only percussionist that could read music in a city marching band. Therefore, they tried moving me from the drum line, and that's what I went there for. So I actually left the band. I was hard-headed. But this really made me think back to those days where I would spend hours practicing, and that joy when you could perfect that one piece, or you could get that riff down, or you could, and it made me miss music, man.
Yeah, there's something about hearing Taku talk about it with such reverence. You know, he's talking about the mundane day-to-day of it even, but he's got a love for it, and it's kind of contagious. And if you've got any love of it yourself, it's easy to fall back in love with it all over again.
Yeah, well, let's fire up this first clip. Here we go.
I got to ask you, man, touring with Fleetwood Mac, Mick Fleetwood, I remember at the concert described you as his secret weapon.
Yeah. That's a stick name for me.
How did you meet these guys? How did this happen? I mean, were you starstruck at every moment? even rehearsing with them?
First of all, is being starstruck. The funny thing is, every major artist I've played for, I feel like I was not necessarily a fan of their music before I worked with them.
Okay.
So, I mean, like a lot of the major artists I worked for, I saw their videos on MTV or I listened to their stuff on the radio, but I never owned a Fleetwood Mac album. I never owned a Whitney Houston album. I think the one artist that I worked for a short stint, whose albums I own and who I was a fan of, was John Mayer. But besides him, I think every other artist, like, I actually had to do my homework. So when I got the call, I was like, okay, game on. I got to learn their whole repertoire of music and buy all their albums and learn inside out. So I think that when those calls came, I didn't have time to be starstruck. I was just like I said, game on. I got to get my act together.
Yeah, that's such a fun quote you get through. This is one of those quotes where we each pulled timestamp from an overlapping bit. We listen on our own and we pull the things we want to talk about. And this is one of those cool ones where we both pulled some part of this quote here. And I was really inspired by, didn't have time to get starstruck, just had to learn the whole catalog. And I think that I've had versions of that in my career as well. And, that's what a pro has to do. You don't have time to get starstruck. You got to just get it done.
And it's amazing to me that he was able to do that. And then I stopped and I think back, well, that's why he's a professional percussionist and I'm not. To be able to, you hear those artists and Linz, I'm envisioning that you're that person that can hear a song, pick up a guitar and play the chords at least, to where my ear's not that trained.
It's not perfectly that way, but I think it's a little bit easier for me to do. I can do it in a couple of minutes. I can kind of piece together something after listening to it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And as Lynn said, this was an overlapping clip. I think I picked the first portion and Lynn's carried on to the second portion, but it's so telling to this gentleman's professionalism and ability to work his craft.
Yeah. And I think that actually really serves us into the next little snippet, because this is where he's talking about, being on stage and he's playing percussion for Whitney Houston, and it's not quite going the way it's planned.
Here we go.
I'm like hitting on the ballad part of the song. I'm hitting the pads, not working. I motion over to my tech, come over here. And he's like, oh, it's not plugged in all the way. So he plugs it in and it triggers this gigantic explosion sample.
Oh God.
In the middle of the ballad.
Oh.
Thank God she wasn't on stage, but all the stagehands, all the crew, everyone ran to the wings because they actually thought the sound was like either the screen or a lighting truss falling on top of the band, like on stage. They thought it was like an actual physical accident that was happening on stage.
Oh my God.
It was literally just a sample of an explosion for the last note of the entire medley. That was kind of masked and melded in with distortion guitars and, the drummer hitting the cymbals and whatnot. But in the middle of a ballad, it was so the lesson was, first of all, check all your electronics, do a dummy check, even if you have a tech that takes care of that stuff, and also compartmentalize your sounds per kit so that you have no cross-pollination. I learned that.
I'm so glad you picked this clip because it was on my short list. I pulled it for the next clip that I chose. So a good job. We would have had two overlapping clips. Absolutely.
No, and I just love, he sets up sort of like how catastrophic that moment could feel. It's an explosion in the middle of a quiet song. And again, thankfully, Whitney Houston was off stage getting costume changed, or he might have gotten a little earful from her. But, and that he took 2 lessons out of it, right? Like that's the way I want to live my life is, hey, you face a hard thing, you get through it, and you go, all right, how can I have at least less hectic of a time next time?
Yeah. Failures that are learned from aren't. They're lessons. And that sentiment's carried beautifully in that piece. That it is. This next clip, we're just going to roll it and then we'll chat.
And then as far as music in general, it's just no matter what instrument it is, embrace music. You know, you have to love music. You have to be into all various styles of music if you want to be a working musician. You can't just be like, I am a funk drummer and I'm only going to play funk music. And it's like, that's great, but you may not be able to make a living doing that. Being a working musician, you definitely have to have an understanding of various genres and various techniques.
You know, you picked this one, but it really speaks to me. I mean, I think it translates almost over to like marketing talk and having to choose a niche or choose a niche. You know, when you're focusing on something, it's like you can say you're only going to want these certain kinds of customers, but at the end of the day, you have to take what comes through the door and you have to learn to be flexible in those moments. And it's like you can't just be a funk drummer. There aren't enough funk bands to employ you. In that same vein, in our other lives, it's like you have to find a way to take your zone of genius and make it a little bit more accessible to find people to work with.
You know, and this clip took me back to a conversation my music teacher in the 7th grade had with me out in the hall, because we were a band, but we played various genres of music. And, you know, we're 7th grade. We don't know anything about music really. And he pretty much had that conversation because I wanted the jazz, I wanted the R&B, I wanted the funk, I wanted the strong horn in these orchestra pieces that were just mundane, and I was a background instrument, which is aching. They made me ache. And come the 9th grade, a young man, I'll call him Andy. His name was Andy. Him and I were first, second chair. Every other week we'd switch. We were just so competitive and trying to one up each other and being first or second horn. Well, we got to become really good friends. And for the Christmas concert for the year, him and I jazzed up a Christmas song, unbeknownst to anybody else in the band. And all the parents are in the audience, faculty's in the audience, and we got to our note. Andy and I stand up and we just start ripping on the horns. And the look on Mr. Powell's face and him just threatening us with that baton to sit down was, I mean, it reflected poorly in our grade that year. However, it was so fun, and the compliments that he got were phenomenal. And we did it in a seamless way. So the band kept playing and they're wondering what's going on, but it worked perfectly.
That's a great story. I mean, I think it's, as a fellow person who I don't know, I could fit in, but sometimes it was more fun to stand out a little bit. I see the rebel in that story, and I feel that.
Yeah, that same concert, we had to wear ties, and we folded up dollar bills into bow ties, and we got in trouble for that too. But we're good horn players.
Yeah.
for 9th graders. Oh, what's your next piece coming up, or you just want
Absolutely.
me to roll it?
Yeah. Well, let's just roll it.
All right, here we go.
I'm on tour with Bette Midler, who I've worked with since 2004. And part of her show is skits. There are moments where I'm like, there is some gag or skit that's supposed to happen where the phone rings, she picks it up and she says something. And I'm in charge of the phone ring. And I have to wait for her to say a line. I'm watching a video screen because it's slightly different every night. I'm about to hit an electronic pad with the phone ring on it, Yes, I'm just like waiting. So that kind of stuff is severely nerve-wracking.
Yeah, make sure it's the explosion.
So that was a good example of, just having to hit one drum pad at the right time is not technically a hard job, but this guy who's an amazing percussionist and drummer is intimidated by the precision of that one moment, not scared of hitting all the beats for the big songs, but that one moment is still like, he has to focus. He gets intimidated. And it's like, man, I've been there myself.
And it's interesting. I've never seen a production that had the percussionist in charge of audio effects. So that was kind of cool. That was a learning point for me.
Yeah. Neat how getting a little bit of the inside baseball of the music.
Yeah.
Stuff.
That wraps it up for Voices Behind the Music. It was, dude, that was a cool episode, Linz.
Yeah, I was really enjoying that one. And what I really liked is that it got paired with your episode. And from seemingly far reaches of the internet, these two shows had some overlapping things. And so I'll kick it to you to kick it off.
Yeah, they did. So the Field Op is a live show. So live, it's a little rough. You know, these aren't professional presenters. We're dealing with two combat Marines. And I again, love working with them. But, you know, it's not as polished as, you know, a highly edited show is. But the stories hold the value, whether there's a little stutter or not. So let's kick off this first piece.
Just like me, I mean, I know I have residual baggage from that, from the experiences. You know, do you struggle with any things? Do you have?
I do not. I don't have no PTSD. I don't have no flashbacks. I don't have no nightmares. I do have a lot of dreams about re-enlisting back into the Marine Corps and going back to war to help the guys fight. But
yeah,
I don't have no kind of PTSD or anything. I'm not on no medications, nothing like that. So I guess I'm just an old school fucking hard-headed Marine.
And there's some explicit language.
Yes. Yes. Here's your post warning on that.
So, Linz, this was actually a clip you chose.
Yeah. Well, I felt like it was an important, you know, I think people who are not former, I've not been in the military. And while I have friends who have been in, it's not really a culture I've spent a lot of time as much around. And so I might have beliefs that are formed on media representations or from TV and movies. And so to me, to hear these two guys talk about their mental state, you know, and be like, I've got some residual stuff, do you? And be able to talk about that really sort of, I think, created a nice like level playing field that helped me like want to listen more.
Yeah, you know, I find working with these guys that it's therapeutic for them to put on the show, whether anyone's listening, the size of their audience. And when they bring on a fellow vet that's, you know, chewed the same dirt and gone through similar experiences, it becomes therapeutic for both of them. You brought that point up earlier, and it's cool for me to play such a little role in them venting, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, one thing I really liked about this episode, and Pacho's had a lot of great episodes, but they both leave the Marine Corps and go on to different career paths. And obviously most Marines do. You know, you can't be an infantryman on the streets of, you know, any big city. Doesn't pay well. But Doug went on to photography. And I believe he references it in some of the clips, so I'm not going to spoil it. But having taken photography classes before and taught some basic photography, this story just resonated with me. Here we go.
You found this, you went into this transition or this calling. Did you always have a thing for photography, or?
I did. I took a semester in high school and I got really good at it, but it wasn't digital back in my day because I'm old. So
right.
My teacher showed us how to build we took black cardboard paper and taped it up with black tape and made a pinhole camera. So we would put the film in the back in a dark room and put our finger over the little metal hole and go outside and set it down.
He goes on to say they remove their hand and it actually exposes that light to the camera to the film and makes an image. And the reason I like this clip, because every intro to photography class, whether it be digital or film, starts off with the pinhole camera.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did not take photography, back in school, but all of my friends had pinhole projects that they went through, and yeah, I just love that. Like, these are sort of ways to be. These are creativity exercises, right? They are learning a field, learning how to use photographic equipment and learning how photographic equipment works. But it's also like an expression of what's in your mind, trying to get it out and onto the print.
At the organization I work, I met Pacho. I used to teach the vets basic photography, and I thought it would be a good idea because when I went out with the purpose of making a picture or taking a picture, every worry in the world, every stress went away because I was focusing so intently on what the eye saw through that lens. And it was calming to me. And it still is. I still do photo walks. Just, it's relaxing to me. And a lot of the guys dove into it and dug it. I wish I would have had the opportunity to meet Doug, but Doug is actually local to me. And I intend on bringing him onto an episode of something or other sooner than later. But I just love that pinhole story.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, I'm excited. These next two quotes are really interesting about where he took photography and how he got sort of deeper into it. But I wanted to point out the thing that the connecting link between these two episodes, which seemingly might not be related, is that both of these guests followed their passion and followed their interest, and they didn't know where it was going to take them, and it's taken them on some wild rides. So that's a good intro into the quote here.
Well said, buddy.
Yeah, I want a camera, and I'm like, well, for it. And she just inspired me to get back into it, because when she showed me her pictures, man, it was like art. Like she didn't do like a straight on shot like this. She would get like down at the angles and hit those angles just right. And I was just like, whoa, that's so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then but you know, I didn't start out shooting people. I was doing landscape. I did landscape from 2008 till about 2012, and I traveled all over the U.S. shooting a lot of things, landscapes, trees, buildings, mountains, rocks, everything, water, rivers, all kinds of stuff. And I got invited to a shoot in L.A. for like a modern day pinup shoot. And then from there, I just got hooked, and now I'm where I'm at now.
Yeah, and his work is absolutely beautiful, and we're going to get into that a little bit more after the last clip is played. But
yeah, I just, I mean, it's like got such a passion, like a passionate curiosity for it and a reverence for it, that again, it's like really, it's like hard not to be interested in photography myself. Like it's infectious.
Very much so. And this last clip actually talks about how hard he had to fight to follow his passion. So here we go.
It's beautiful what you do, and you could tell the passion and the care that you put into the work, especially when you do the pinups. And before we start reviewing, talking about that type of work, how'd you get involved with the whole pinups for vets, and then doing that type of background and stuff? Okay, yeah, go ahead. And we'll set up the premise for that, and then we'll look at some of your artwork, man.
All right. I didn't know anything about pinups for vets, and I really didn't know how to shoot pinups. The first shoot I went to was a modern day pinup, but they had like cutoff shorts. They were wearing like gym shoes. Some girls had their hair up good, and they were wearing like gingham shirts and things like that. But it wasn't like a real. It was more rockabilly, exactly. Right. And so I always was like, man, I would see people like, because Instagram and Facebook wasn't a thing. It was, but it wasn't really. It didn't take off like it is now. Right. But I would follow a few people, and I actually reached out to them and asked them, hey, can I come sit in on a shoot so I can learn how to do this? And no. Everybody was always no. People stingy.
I love that clip because some people are stingy protecting their secrets. And Linz, both of you, we aren't that way.
No.
We've shared freely. The pool's big enough for everybody to come play. But I've come up against that, in my own life, and I'm sure everybody has. But the passion to keep fighting and driving to perfect his craft and create the art this man's creating nowadays is phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, you need to have the right amount of pushback at the right time for it to feel like the right kind of challenge that you can push through, and I think sometimes if you get in too easy, then you kind of give up. And if it's too hard, then there's no way to push through. But, the right kind of challenge at the right time. And you're like, these people aren't letting me in. And now you've got this like attitude about it. You're like, well, I'm going to do something about it now, you know? And so it's great to know that he kind of was able to push through those things. I think we've all got that in us, you know, and I know that I choose to be more inclusive because of the people who've shut their door in my face, and I want to bring a different energy.
You know, that, and I think to your point, if it's too easy, we don't appreciate it, the final result, because it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
And having to fight and struggle and learn the hard way sometimes just brings so much more value once it's achieved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this guy is involved with Pinup for Vets. He does not shoot the calendar, but he shot the decks of cards. He does the poster shoots. His work is from camera to Photoshop to Illustrator, back to Photoshop to print. And the amount of time he puts into every single image, it is a piece of art.
And that should make you want to stick around for when we drop that full episode in our feed later this week. As is our custom, we'll be dropping both of these full episodes into our feed on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. And the order that happens in will depend upon your feedback and engagement on our posts and on our website.
Yep. So you hit feeddrops.com, visit this episode, and go down into the comments and let us know, did Linz's episode beat out Brian's episode? And now we are not putting podcast against podcast.
No.
We're putting choice against choice between Linz and I.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you felt compelled, if you resonated with one of these more than another, or if you resonated with both, we'll happily take that comment as well. We really just want to get some kind of engagement off of these, some engagement in listeners for these podcasts. And we really want you to submit your podcast or your favorite podcasts to be on this show. You can go to our website, feeddrops.com, and there's a link up top to submit your show. And it's also our pinned tweet on Twitter. So you can find us through that way as well.
And you can also find us on Instagram. We'd love to share what we're doing there. And, follow our shows that we like too. So if you liked one of the shows or all of the shows, you'll most likely be able to see them either in our feed and or as that we're following them. Is that how it is in Instagram?
Yeah, I think you'll see
them.
Yeah, I think you'll see them. We'll certainly highlight their work as, leading up to these episodes. That's a part of it. So keep an eye on our social channels, and definitely tune in next Monday for our next episode, where we will bring two brand new shows together, one from me and one from Brian, and we'll talk about them like we did these.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us this week. And until next.